to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm Jen Taylor, your host. I am mom of 18, and you can find me on momsrunningit.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive right in. Yay! I'm here with Coach John McLernon today. We are live, and if you're watching this later, welcome. You are the first dad on this series. I am really encouraging dads to show up, and we kind
Yeah.
of talked about that a little bit before. Like, as a lactation consultant and a birth assistant, one of my big goals, because I had been a mom already,
Yeah.
was to make sure that the dads felt included. There's something that removes you, like you feel you're there watching this person you love go through all this pain, you feel helpless. A lot of dads, you have the birth plan and you're ready to go, then you see your wife in this situation, you're like, maybe you do want the epidural, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's harder to be the advocate. And then this baby comes home, and a lot of dads feel replaced or
Mhm.
misplaced, I guess. So
Yeah.
I love that you're a dad sharing your story. So, John, you've been on my podcast before. I have the link to that episode available for people because your story is incredible, incredible, incredible. So, and also I want to point out that your website is on the link because uh, we can talk about that at the end, but you're a weight loss coach
Yeah, I
essentially.
am.
So stick
Yes.
around or go to the link. So jump in with your story of becoming a parent.
Yeah. Well, we started later in life, or it feels like later, because I was 39 when my wife got pregnant, and there were just some circumstances that led to it sort of happening in that way. But I think it couldn't have happened at a better time in terms of my emotional and mental health and development. But it was quite a nerve-wracking thing in a sense. But I remember starting out and just being terrified at the thought of my wife giving birth. Now, I
Mm.
think that part of that comes from how it's portrayed in popular media. It's this like screaming fest of like blood curdling agony, you know, and your wife turns into this monster who's going to rip your head off and look like she's demon possessed and something, and that's maybe that does happen in some instances, but that's the image that's imprinted on our minds. But so I decided, well, you know what? If I'm going to be a support to my wife, because I kind of had to accept there's certain parts of it where I'm just going to be or feel helpless, like you can't stop the experience. So I'm going to learn everything I can about it so I can be the best support I can in this experience. And so as I started learning about labor and like the stages of labor and what it looks like, and I started to feel a little bit more empowered. And I started
Mm.
to feel like, and I just decided for my wife that I'm going to become your best advocate. I'm on your side, and I'm going to be the one that's going to I get to step into my protector role. You just have to focus on giving birth, and I'm going to be as educated as I can, and I'm going to be there standing up for your rights, defending what it is that you want to do when you're in no shape to be having a logical discussion. And so
Amen, right? Amen. Well, that's why you have a birth plan.
yeah.
So I taught 2 childbirth education classes, and one of them was Bradley. Did you do any childbirth education? Because Bradley really involves the husband a lot, and you do
we
a birth plan and stuff.
we did a hypnobirthing course, which
Oh, awesome.
I thought was
Okay.
good, and I was I of course I love mindset work, and I'm a certified meditation coach as well. Although that came after the fact. But ironically, things, of course, never go according to plan. And I think it's really important to go in with this mindset. We have this plan, and so we were upfront with the nurses and whatnot, and we ended up having to have an induced labor because she was 15 days overdue.
Mhm.
And the baby was fine. Baby was healthy, happy as a clam in there. So they're like, okay, first time around, we're not gonna, we'll just kind of let it go till it gets to this point. But so we went in there with a plan, but we wrote in our plan, hey, this is what we'd like to happen ideally, but we recognize this is taking place in the real world. We recognize that you are the experts. We wanted to create a very like healthy working relationship with our, I guess the nurses
Mhm.
and doctors, the birth partners. And so we wanted this to be collaborative. But it's funny, like we brought things like, a speaker and a laptop if we, and so on, because we had no idea how long this was going to go. None of that stuff ever got used.
Well, I'd rather have it and not use it than wish I had something, and you don't know. And
Yeah.
I think I wanna ask you a question. I wanna go back for in a minute, but I think when you don't, the biggest fear is the fear of the unknown
Yes.
in childbirth, because once I had experienced it, once you do it and you know you can do it, you're like, "Oh, okay, so here's how I would have liked to have done it differently, and here's how I wanna do it differently in the future," right? But Like with all the birth plans and prepping and bringing the laptop and this, you have no idea what's going to happen, really.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
we go back though,
Mm.
because you said you got pregnant later in life? Was that a plan, or were there issues in getting pregnant?
There weren't, as far as we know, any physical issues, although we were concerned because I was born premature myself. I was born 3 months premature. There can be some issues with fertility, and so it did appear that I had a relatively low sperm count, but there was no other like major issues. But
Okay.
for us, it was more like life circumstances. So just a couple of years earlier, I'd lost my business,
Mhm.
and my business partner was a crook, and I got taken for a ride and lost all of my life savings and investment and all of this, and so that just like flatlined everything. And we're like, oh my gosh, we can't bring a kid into the world in this. And
Okay.
prior to that,
Okay.
we'd been on sort of our world tour, world tour.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I knew that, and that's in the first podcast, but also you were a traveling teacher. You went to how many
Mm-mm.
countries?
45.
That yeah, I mean, like, for 5 years?
Yeah, thereabouts. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
S
we've been travelers since we were first married, and we've been together for about 17 years, but we had like a dedicated stretch where we're like, this is what we're doing with our life kind of thing.
And I thought maybe you were intentionally putting parenting on. I mean, some people wait until they're older because they want to. They don't
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
ready, or because of circumstances. I mean, my best friend from college decided not to have kids and had this massive heart to heart with me. Like, there's so many different reasons why. I was just kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
curious if there was a, so there was no fertility. You guys waited, and
Yeah.
then okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I think the other part of it was like, so I wanted to be a dad for a very long time, and I made it clear to my wife in a very like sort of, I guess I was gonna say low key way. There was no real pressure there, but I said I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, I'm 100% in. Like I want to be a dad.
Got it.
That's what I
Okay.
want in life. And so for her, I think it was this element. We had these years of insecurity after, I went through my, PTSD and trauma and all that kind of stuff, which
Correct.
is in the other episode.
Yep.
I wanted to be in a healthier place mentally and emotionally as well. And so I
Right.
think it was really, really like fantastic timing.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I was a mom at 21 and it was planned. And that
Yeah.
sounds stupid to me now. Like, what? I mean, I went through a year of infertility before I got, so like, I started that it's crazy. It's crazy to even think about that. Although at the time, I was married, that's what we wanted to do.
Right.
I
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
go through infertility. Like, you just kind of take the next step, but I really wanted to. And my daughter's turning 30 and I have zero regrets. It was the most fun, best thing I've ever done. And we're
Yeah.
all so different. I want you to talk about more about like the studying and how that prepared you and what prepared you and what was shocking or not shocking, and then segue into the being 15 days overdue, because I have been also, and it was my third delivery and it's still nerve-wracking because
Hmm. Hmm.
you start to talk statistics in your mind. Higher chance of C-section, higher chance of the baby being
Yeah.
born with something,
Yeah.
like there's all these stats, right? So take me through your learning curve, because I love that you did this.
Yeah. Well, I just was like, I need to understand what it actually looks like. And one of these things this hypnobirthing course talked about was stop watching how media portrays pregnancy and childbirth,
Yeah.
because they portray it for dramatic effect. They don't portray an accurate version of reality. That's not to say that childbirth was easy, but they even show examples of, childbirth, like water birthing and things like that, and home birthing and so on, where obviously it's uncomfortable. But when you kind of understand that a woman's body has the power and the ability to do this, like it's like superhuman, really. And you go,
Mm.
okay, like this is going to be probably the most difficult thing like my wife ever goes through, but her body can do this. Her body is incredible. It's amazing. It's powerful. And so just learning about that kind of reassured me a little bit. And I think just being informed and not being ignorant of what was going to take place. I mean, obviously we couldn't see the future, but I just went into it not feeling so scared and feeling at least empowered that I know the steps I can do to help her, and everything outside of that's outside of my control. So I'm just going to make peace with that.
Wow. I mean, that's really hard. That's a really hard thing to do, I think, especially, I don't wanna stereotype, but more for
Mm,
men than for women maybe. Like the provider, the world on your shoulders, the responsible one, the
yeah, yeah,
protector, but I'm so glad that that happened because, some births are like media portrays it,
sure, yeah,
but
yeah,
in my experience, none of them have been like, none
yeah.
of the births I've assisted on or had myself have been anything like media portrays.
Yeah, and so for us, like obviously the due date came and went, and we'd also
Yep.
been told not to put like too much stock in it. I mean, it's hard not to in a sense,
Right.
but we're told not to put too much stock in it, not too much pressure because in a sense, there is an idea, okay, like nature has a pretty good idea. And if we need a little extra time, we need a little extra time. And so we just asked for extra monitoring. And in Canada, we have like quite good universal health care. And so it was no extra cost to us to have this extra monitoring. So we did, biweekly or twice weekly ultrasounds and a few other checks just with our doctor. Everything's, seemed good, seemed healthy. Mom was healthy. Like there wasn't any major concerns, but it got to a point where they're like, okay, we're going to have to induce if this doesn't happen today,
Yeah.
because like the placentas were starting to break down.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I was 18 days overdue once, and um, how did your wife? I don't. I mean, like from your okay. I was really trying hard to like I didn't feel like I was in a bad mood. You're real uncomfortable. 6 week, 37 week. Okay,
Mm-mm.
anytime is fine, right? And in your brain, you're like ready. You're on a
Yeah.
countdown. And you know that going closer to 40 is better, but there's also a point where like you're uncomfortable. And I
Yes.
remember feeling like I was trying to be so kind and so nice and so patient, and that's not how my family saw me, and I wasn't awful, but
Right.
I
Right.
was definitely 40 plus weeks pregnant, and it was a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
cranky. How did your wife handle it? How did you handle that? And then jump into the induction.
Yeah. Like she was on the same page. Like, we're not hippies or anything, but we're like, okay, we want to kind of let nature take its course. We want to avoid
Right.
induction if possible, because we didn't want to go the pitocin route, if
Right.
possible, because that can be a really, really difficult and uncomfortable pregnancy. And so we were both on board. I mean, but she was pretty done with just being pregnant. Now, granted, this happened sort of in the middle of the pandemic, and so we weren't seeing a lot of people anyways. And I work from home, and so it was kind of just the two of us in our little bubble. We would read stories and sing to, we called him Baby Bean. We didn't know it was a boy at the time. We didn't, it was just Baby Bean. We would sing and tell
You didn't
stories.
do a gender check.
No, no.
I didn't either. I love this.
We did
Okay.
not. We
Okay.
did not want to know. We're like, now in my heart, I was like, from day one, this is a boy.
Okay.
I couldn't say, I just knew it. I was like, this is a boy. I'm certain of it. But we don't want to know. And I would have been very happy with a daughter as well. I know we do have a son, obviously. And so we watch comedies every night, just tried to get her laughing and relaxed. And like, we kind of like hamsters, just like laying around and eating and just watching funny things. Yeah. And well, truthfully, we had a lot of sex as well, because semen contains
Yep.
prostaglandins that can help bring on labor. And it's not nothing.
Yep.
The downside is it's a lot more business-like than, it was like, there's a purpose to this. We're not just kind of doing it for a physical enjoyment. There's kind of because that's what the doctor, she's like, hey, look, if you want this to
Have as
happen,
much
here's one of the
sex.
way. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, and look, from a male perspective, it sounds like it's brilliant, but I mean, my wife's 40 weeks pregnant, and look, I'm pretty considerate of her and her physical comfort and whatnot. So I was like, let's try to make this as comfortable as possible for you.
Yeah.
You know,
I've been there, and you know what? It's interesting for me hormonally. I wanted the sex.
yeah, yeah,
I wanted the orgasm. I wanted
yes,
the
yeah,
release. I wanted the contraction of my uterus. Like
yeah,
I actually had a very high sex drive at the end, but then no
yeah,
matter what, it doesn't feel the same.
yes, yeah.
It's not like what your mind is remembering from college, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there was a lot of false starts as well,
yeah.
and that was like really hard over the probably a 4 or 5 week span. It was like, oh, I'm feeling something. Is it starting? And it's like, no. And my wife had really painful Braxton Hicks,
Yeah.
and she was like so kind of annoyed at women who were like, oh, I didn't feel a thing, and she's like, she had painful Braxton Hicks from like 32 weeks, and we were actually thought the baby was going to come early. I mean, because of these things.
Mm.
And you keep getting checked, nope, nothing. And I think she probably walked around like probably 3-4 weeks at like 4 centimeters dilated, and then just nothing, just stalled out. And you're like,
Yeah.
what do you do?
Yeah.
So that was kind of, so it came time for the induction. And it was scheduled. So we go to the hospital. We had this time set where like, if it doesn't happen before, then this is what we're doing. And
Yep.
they gave her Cervidil, it's called, and so that's just
Mhm.
to ripen the cervix, as they call it. And that was enough to get the process started, thankfully. So she didn't have to go on pitocin. So we went back home. They're like, come back when they're 2 minutes apart, give or take. So we just went back home, sat in our chairs. I held her hands and sort of breathed with her through the contractions and whatnot. And we watched funny movies again. And we went in at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon back to the hospital, because she had the Cervidil put in around 8 in the morning. So 6 hours later. So now it's real. Now it's on. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm as ready as I'm going to be. Like, I'm all fired up. Like, we've got this plan. You know, I know what I'm going to do. You know, I'm set. It's battle stations for this guy. And yeah,
I
like
love it. Okay.
I was like, okay, look, I'm stepping into my role here as protector for my wife who's going through this like life changing, life altering experience. And you know, like that felt like, look, I love being a man. I love being male. I love being a protector. Like, I love being a
Mhm.
provider. Like, I embrace masculinity in like, it's a really, I think masculinity is amazing. And
Mhm.
why should we shy away from the fact that I want to be these things? And so I was like, no, I'm stepping into this. I know there's things I can't do, but everything I can do, I'm going to do. But the so we got there. My wife labored in the tub for quite a bit. You know, I was just feeding her and breathing with her. Just, you know, we practiced like paired breathing and stuff like that to help
Mhm.
her through the different contractions. And then it got to a certain point where like, okay, we better head to the bed because they're like coming maybe 30 seconds apart. And but it got to the point where the doctor was like, yeah, you're like, your water hasn't broken. And it was now like 8, 9 o'clock at night, I think. And she's like, okay, we have options. You can just kind of keep laboring away, or we can break your water. And so we talked about it. And we're like, okay, you know what? Let's just do that. Took the doctor 6 tries. It's like, this is the toughest sack that she's ever no wonder this baby wasn't coming. It was like, it was so thick and like layered that like this was never going to break. And so, but then as soon as the water broke, it was
Yeah.
on like full on for 5 hours. Like,
Yeah.
and that was when the real shift happened. Like, obviously the labor was uncomfortable, the contractions and whatnot, and she was able to breathe through. Like, my wife is a hell of a trooper. She's got a pretty high pain tolerance, and we hoped for no epidural. That was the plan, and she didn't end up having one. But now all of a sudden, if I touched her, she said it felt like 50 tons of bricks on her back. Like, I couldn't, the lightest touch of a finger on her. And that part of it was really tough on me because,
Mhm.
you know, I wanted to be able to, you know, stroke her forehead, you know, rub her back, you know, provide some counter pressure on her hips, all this kind of stuff. Wasn't happening. She was like, no. And she was so gracious, like, being in all this pain and discomfort. She was trying to communicate me, like, don't touch me, but I'm not mad at you. And, you know, and so really all I could do was you know, and we had her on all fours because we didn't want to do the
Yep.
classic legs in the air. And so I'd run around to her. I'd like look her right in the eye and like, I'm here with you. You're amazing. Just keep going. And I'd run around to check the progress. And, you know, some guys I guess are grossed out by that, but I'm like, look, I've had my face down there before. Like, so
True, but it is different, and
obviously it is,
I can
but
understand it's hard to look at a vagina sexually
yeah,
after seeing that. Although why? Like, you're
yeah,
doing
why?
exactly what your body's supposed to, and then it bounces back and it's ready for a penis and not a like,
Yeah, yeah,
why? So good
yeah.
for you because yes, your face has been down there before.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know, and you know, she pooped a little bit too, and I'm like, whatever.
Yep.
Like, I don't care. So I was so like, I was prepared for all of these things. I mean, it was actually a very small amount, all things considered, given
Right.
5 hours of hard labor. Like, and then it was 2 hours of pushing too, which was so it was like from 8 to 11 was like this really really hard intense labor, and but they kept checking the baby's heartbeat because it was going on longer, and so it's like my wife never got a break because it's like, okay, it's between
Yeah.
contractions. Okay, we need you in this position so we can check the baby's. Like, it was just physically just taxing and exhausting. And then like 2 hours of pushing, like, we didn't think it was going to take that long, you know. But I remember my excitement when I started to see like the top of the scalp, and I could see like that's the top of the baby's head,
Right.
and like my excitement, of course, goes through the roof, and so that I'm just like, and I'm right there in her face, being like, "We're this close, we're so close, you know, keep going, you know, you're going to do this," and so you know, and it wasn't too long after that baby pops out, and now she's, you know, and now her body's just like shaking, just full on
Yeah.
like body shudders, just shaking, all this adrenaline coursing through her. Just, you know, she's been through it was now like 1:30 in the morning, so what are we 17 18 hours of labor
Yeah.
all together, you know. And the first thing I said to her was, I was right. Because yeah,
That's not generally what we want to hear, but yes.
well, because
Here's
she was
your
saying, well,
point.
what is it? And I was like, I was right. And anyways, you know, get it wrapped up, get it in arms. We wanted skin to skin right away. We knew like that was a part of our plan, and all, you know. And she was just like, I can't believe it's real. I can't believe it's real. You know, and it was this beautiful
Yeah.
thing. But now comes the aftermath. They had to manually remove the placenta, and she'd lost quite a bit of blood. And, I mean, obviously that happens in birth, losing blood and whatnot, but they're like, we have to act on this now. Otherwise, like, we're going into surgery. So I'm like, that's the last thing you want to hear after okay, I've got the baby in my arms now. And I remember holding him and just looking at him and being like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, like, this is real. This little human is my responsibility now. And wow, it felt like something physically changed in my body at that point in time. I was like, yeah, this is no longer an idea in my head. This is real, and this little human needs me, and I'm going to be here for it. And then I was just like super exhausted because we'd been up for 36 hours straight. We didn't really sleep the night before, knowing all this was coming, and so and the hospital doesn't provide like a place for me to sleep at all. It was like, you have this stiff, hard, like dinner table chair to sit on. Yeah. And I did not want to leave my wife's side. Yeah.
Right.
But eventually I was like,
how stiff, how stiff, sorry, I heard you saying the chair. How difficult was it? You have this brand new baby in your arms, and then the doctor looks at you and says, we have to do this now or she's going into surgery. How split were you? Because that would be a really, really hard thing.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I'm pretty good at keeping a cool head under pressure. Even if inside I feel like really torn up. So I just went to my wife and I said, look, this is what's happening. And then, obviously she's there, she's awake, she can hear it, but she's just been through this as well. And I said, this is your body, you decide. And ultimately she's like, well, I've just been through about the most pain I can possibly imagine. If we can do it here, let's do it here. And so,
okay, great.
And it was a female doctor, and she went in and she had smaller hands. So I guess that helps. Like manual removal. She's got to put her arm up in there and get into the uterus and scrape the stuff out.
Yep.
And it's agonizing. They did give her a shot of fentanyl to help that. And I was obviously, of course, they discussed that with us beforehand. I was a bit worried because, you hear fentanyl and you hear fentanyl overdose and drug overdose. And I was like, is there any dependency going to develop? Like, okay, if we're going to use this, I understand. But, anyways, they reassured me, no, in this situation, no, it's the smallest dose required, all that kind of stuff. And thankfully, my wife is not involved in an opioid addiction, gratefully. and that was the only time in her life that she's ever had fentanyl. And it got her through it. So.
Wow. So you're sitting there with holding the baby while your wife's going through this manual extraction.
Well, I've got kind of the baby on one arm, and I'm trying to like lean over her with the other and just like stroke her forehead and just keep her distracted and look at our beautiful boy. Look at him. Look what you did. You're so amazing. You're so incredible. And he's so beautiful. And of course, babies look a little bit goofy when they come out. Their head's a bit misshapen and they look kind of like an alien, but we don't care. You're blind. You see this beautiful, amazing human, and it's not what the pictures show. Yeah. In the movies, it's like a 4-month-old baby that comes out pregnant. You're like, that's like a 15, 16-pound baby there, like with a pretty well-shaped head.
and I mean, honestly, if you look back at pictures and stuff, what you should be saying is, we'll love him anyway. It's fine. Like, this is scary and ugly, and we'll love him anyway. Yeah, but you emotions, are totally different. So you sat there with her. It was awful, I'm guessing, having the manual extraction.
Yeah. Now, once that was done, I was now curious. I'm like, well, I'm here. I'm going to look at the placenta.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm like, and so, baby's back in her arms again. She's holding him. And so I'm going to look at this because I want to understand more about this whole thing. And you could see she like it was kind of broken in 2 parts, but you could see it was like all cracked up and starting to calcify. And they point out this and that. And so I was kind of looking at the anatomy of the placenta because they have to look at it too. They have to look at it for the health of it. Did we get all of it? Any deformities that we need to be aware of and so on. And, I think we managed to wait maybe 5-6 minutes before cutting the cord as well. I did get to cut the cord.
Oh, good.
They gave me the dullest scissors on the planet. Like, I mean, the cord is like tough and sinewy, but I'm like, oh my gosh, the scissors are like warped. You know how scissors have like a gap between their blades and don't cut properly, and they're like apologetic. We're like, sorry,
You're like, your hands hurting, you're cramping,
like, and of course you think, oh, is this hurting the baby? And he's not caring,
No.
And so. Yeah, and of course we wanted to keep the what's the little coating on the babies that had like that waxy coating they're born with?
Wow, Vernix.
But there was hardly any at all at this point. Like that was basically all. Like they said, if he'd been born like on time, he probably would have had more. But like no, and because we're like, can we make sure we massage this? We don't want him like bathe. And they're actually, I think in Canada, maybe down there as well, they don't bathe them for at least 24 hours.
Yeah, and you can ask for it to not happen at all.
Yeah. I did get to give him his first bath, like with the help of a nurse, and I got to change his first diaper. And, it was like it was pretty neat. Like obviously, I just felt like a big fumble-fingered buffoon with this tiny little human. I'm just terrified of doing anything that would hurt him, or you got a heart full of love, but you just look at this delicate, fragile little being, and and they're more resilient than we like recognize. But they just
Mhm.
look, their fingers are so tiny, and all, so. I think my favorite thing was holding him, and he would just like scrunch up in the fetal position, or we called it froggy scrunch, and he would
Yeah.
just like nestle into my shoulder, and I was like, "This is the greatest thing ever,"
The best. And, like, their face is right by your neck, and you can
Yeah,
smell
yeah,
them, and it's the
yeah.
best thing ever. Your wife's recovery,
Mm.
how did she do after, the manual removal? How did she heal?
A lot of
Um,
painkillers.
yeah.
So I thankfully, again, because I work from home, I recognize I run my own business, so that gave me a little bit more freedom. And I'd kind of like shunted some work back. All my clients knew that I was going to be a little bit less available. They were so understanding. Like that was
Yeah.
incredible. And because I'm a solopreneur, I got to keep running the show. But I said,
Right.
look, I'm going to be a little bit less available, a little bit less responsive. I'm still here. My wife and I agreed. We understand I still have to run this. So I was like doing her hot bag every like couple of hours, hot water bottles, making sure she was on schedule with her painkillers because she's exhausted and I'm
Yep.
exhausted too. Like, um, but I just set a whole series of alarms in my phone. Was like, at this time you take this, at this time you take this. So I made sure
Yep.
that I was scheduling everything for her, um, because again, I mean, she's just trying to keep this little human alive. Like,
Right.
and I got on every diaper I could. I was like, okay, you're handling the input, I'll handle the output. You know, um,
Great.
but we had a bit of a crisis when he was about 4 days old. So her milk hadn't really come in as effectively as we'd hoped, and he was starting to get those orange crystals in his diaper, which are crystallized urine. And so we called, and they're like, you got to get to the hospital right away. And my wife, and it's COVID, and so I'm the one that brings him in because right now, she's still exhausted and she can't hardly remember her own name. Somehow she obviously she instinctually knows how to care for him. um, so I go in and I do all the explaining, and she's has to sit in the car and thinking like, oh, what have I done? Have I hurt my baby? Just crying like, what's wrong? And postpartum and all of this, like just a blubbering mess. And I say that with the utmost of love and affection. So she wanted me to go in there because obviously I could explain a little more clearly,
Right.
rather than through like sort of heaving sobs and crying. But it's the hardest thing in the world to like take our little boy into the hospital, leaving my wife in the car, but they wouldn't let both of us come in. And I'm like, do you realize how inhumane this is?
Yeah.
Like separating my little boy from my wife so I can go and explain like everything that's been taking place because I'm a little bit more rested, and
Yeah.
so that was really tough. And they
Yeah.
they kept her in there for the day, and then we have to swap out at a certain point, of course, because okay, we got everything sort of lined up. Okay, now you have to leave, and she comes in, and it was brutal. And of course there's no updates coming, so now I'm just sitting in the car in a parking lot being like, how long
So
am I going to be here? What's happening? And obviously the story has a happy ending. He's okay. They get him rehydrated. They make sure that they didn't have to do any electrolytes or anything like that. Like they got enough lactation going, and we had some lactation consultations, which are absolutely
oh,
brilliant.
good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. Oh my gosh, nursing is, I mean, it's amazing. But boy, is that ever tough too. And so, yeah, I really just, as much as possible, again, like if I felt kind of, or I could have fallen into a feeling of uselessness because, she's nursing. Every time it's up, she's the one that's getting up for it, comforting and so on. And this little human basically not like rejects me, not rejects me, but it's like, doesn't know who I am. And
Right.
that goes on for probably a few months. Now,
Right.
obviously, he develops a familiarity with my face and my smell and my voice and so on. But those first few months, like, mom's everything. And I want to comfort him. I want to hold him. Nope, not doing it. He was just scrapping the heck out of me until he gets into mom's arms. And so,
Mm.
again, and maybe that's not the case with all babies, but he would just about claw my face off to be like, get me back to mom.
Right.
And so that was definitely tough. That I because I wanted to be there. I so badly wanted to be able to give her a break, hold him, comfort him. It just wasn't happening. I'm like, so again, I had to go, okay, what are the things I can do? What are the things I can do to lighten her burden? All the cooking, helping her to pump, bringing her to the pump, making sure it's charged, all this kind of stuff. So all of the sort of unglamorous behind the scenes little details that I could take care of for her at least made it feel like I was still in my sort of protector provider role.
I mean, that's so important though, right? Because when you're the mom and basically your only purpose is to give birth and breastfeed this
Yeah.
child, that's really the only, once you've given birth, your only purpose. And that's hard for the mom too. You feel like I need a shower.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never have time not
Mm.
being touched.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love to breastfeed, but holy cow, it's overwhelming. You
Yeah.
worry about the baby. Like really, it can be a it's a really tough transition for the mom and the dad for different reasons, but, like, her sole purpose is to just heal your body and breastfeed this baby. Such load off.
Yeah.
It's just dynamically different roles, and it's
Yeah.
yeah, so, that it was great that you just went there and like you were displaced and unneeded. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have this one memory. We had like sort of our den set up as a bedroom. He still hasn't slept in there a year later. He still has a crib beside our bed. But and I was sitting in this rocking chair. It's one of those rockers with the rocking stool, and just holding him and being like, "Mama needs sleep." And I'm so exhausted that I can't see straight either. But I'm like, I can't fall asleep with this little human in my arms. So I'm watching, like, I would watch the minutes and I would go 5 more minutes. I just have to make it 5 more minutes. And I'd watch, each minute tick off the clock, and I'd, smack myself a little, okay, got to keep going 5 more minutes because mama needs sleep, and I just remember that sheer exhaustion. And of course, my parents lived 10 hours away at the time, and COVID restrictions, they weren't allowed to travel interprovincially. So they weren't allowed to cross over the border
Oh.
into our province. So we had like no support in this time as well. So I could only imagine if I had to go back to work and she was alone in this, how difficult that would have been. And so, but it was little things like making frozen pads for her. A lot of that. We just about killed ourselves laughing for when I was applying hemorrhoid cream for her. Like it was, we're like, well, whatever. I've seen you give birth, so let's just get over
I
this. And but I'm like, this is true love when I can look at the hemorrhoids in your butthole and apply hemorrhoid cream, because it's just too painful and too hard for you to reach there.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't realize how much you're gonna let go of because
Yeah,
after
yeah,
you have a baby, like anything that ever happens, you're like, seriously, what? This is just nothing is ever a
yeah,
big deal. Once you
yeah,
have your husband apply hemorrhoid cream and you've given birth in front of a team of people, like seriously, this is just that's it. You're done. You're like, what?
yeah,
Nothing else matters. Oh,
yeah.
naked in the gym locker room, like flat. Like
Yeah.
you just
So there's
don't care.
there's a certain degree of, I think, liberation that comes from it.
Yep.
And again, it was the same thing. Like, you could get all weird about this stuff if you want to, but I was like, what, I kept saying, like, my wife's body has just been through this unbelievable, incredible, miraculous, like, transformation. She grew a human life and then birthed it and now feeds it from her body. Like, it is so, like, I know it's so common because there's, 8 billion of us on the planet, and who knows how many people have been born before, but it's every individual one is still a miracle. And I didn't want to lose sight of that. It was just how incredible and how amazing this was. And so through all the tough nights, all the sleepless nights and all of this, like, we just kept reminding ourselves, we have this beautiful baby boy, he's healthy. He's grown like a weed. Like, it's amazing. And now he's just ticked over a year old. And it's now getting to be like super fun to be a dad.
Yeah. It takes yeah, there's definitely splits and different things and changes in roles and I understand it. It's kind of natural and it is incredible. It's amazing. I'm so thankful. So I have two questions. One, are you going to do it again?
Hopefully, all being well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my wife has some pelvic health issues, which comes as no surprise after sort of childbirth later in life. She was 37, 38. So that 37. So there's that. So, and then ironically, I've developed some hip issues and we're actually trying to figure this one out. But I think it stems from a couple of motorcycle accidents I had a number of years ago that have shown up to haunt me again. And so there's like a physical impediment right now. But my
Okay.
wife's my wife's also like, well, I'm not quite sure I'm ready. Like, we want to space it out a little bit if we
Yeah.
can. But
Yeah.
very much, yeah, and it'd be amazing to have a daughter. We'd love to have a pigeon pair. I think that's what they call it, a pigeon pair, when you have a son and a daughter. So we
Awesome.
we would love that. Yeah.
So give me your your elevator pitch about your coaching, and people know where to find you because the link's in there.
Yeah.
But give an overview of what you do as far as coaching, because a lot of parents are feeling like you felt, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, I work with you as two experts collaborating, and what we're going to do is this isn't me. I'm the guru, you're the dummy. I tell you what to do. You have to follow it. This is we're going to work together in a partnership to help you get to the goal that you want to get to. I empower people rather than like I said, just to tell people what to do is completely disempowering. Just to hand them a plan and say you have to follow it because I'm smarter than you. That doesn't work. This is a process where I guide people step by step through reverse engineering their own healthy lifestyle from the perspective of their brain, which is this is where it gets really fascinating. I call it brain driven weight loss, and really helping people understand why they do what they do. In a nutshell, I say I marry the compassion of human connection with the psychology of behavior change and the science of metabolism to really create life changing results. And so, at the heart of everything I do is compassion, and I think that's the secret sauce that makes these transformations possible.
yes, I love it. Your website has so much information. It's amazing, and your story is incredible. Your other story is
Yeah, yeah.
amazing. People can listen to that. You can also read a bunch about it on the website. You have a YouTube channel. That was the only thing we weren't connected with. I was like, how does he have something I haven't been part of? So,
Yeah, yeah.
people
Well,
people can find you anywhere.
they can. I run 3 podcasts. One's called Between the Before and After. That's just about people's life stories overcoming major obstacles, which I don't know if you've been on there yet. I'm like, "I don't think you
I
have."
don't think I have. We need to
Okay.
talk.
Yeah. One's called It's Not So Black and White. And so that's about having civil, nuanced conversation in the era of cancel culture and so on. So it's myself and primarily my co host, Lamar. I'm a small town white boy from Canada, and grew up in inner city New York. And so we're total opposites, but we hit it off. And then the third one's called Wellness Unfiltered, where we're really about empowering people to become active participants in their health instead of just a patient waiting for a diagnosis.
I love it. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on today. I love chatting with you. I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.